Today we will be completing ULS Math Lesson 25B. Today we will be looking at graphs to answer questions about data. So we're going to be looking at different types of graphs and different data to answer questions. So let's look at our focus question. What kind of graph can we use to show the results of a survey? A bar graph, line graph, or both? Our survey, for example, could be, do you prefer hot dogs or hamburgers? And we would then go and survey multiple people so that we have multiple sources of data. And we want to put all of the data that we collect together. So would we be using a bar graph to show our data, our results, or would we use a line graph, or would we use both? The answer is both. We could use both of these types of graphs to show our data. We can use letters in place of numbers we do not know. Numbers we do not know are called variables. The variables represent numbers that we have to find. So sometimes when we're answering a question, we have a number that we don't know. And when we have a number that we don't know, we call that our variable. And instead of just leaving a blank space, what we do is we use a letter in place and we create an equation. So if we look at our pictures, here we are, we're trying to figure out a number. We don't know what our variable is. So we're going to write out our equation and then we would end up solving it. It's important to know that when you're using a letter in place of a number for your variable, it doesn't just have to be A, B, or C. It can be any letter in the alphabet. So let's review some key terms before we get started. So we know our variable is the number we don't know. This is the number we're trying to solve for. We write it as a letter until we know what it is. So we're always going to write our variable as a letter until we solve it. And we know that a plus sign means all together. So when we see plus sign, we're going to be adding. We're putting things all together. And when we see a minus sign, that could mean how many are left, how many more, or how many less. Remember, minus means subtract. So let's read our objective, our goal for today. I will write and solve equations and plot points on a coordinate graph. So we're going to be using graphs to help solve equations, and we're also going to be plotting points on a graph. So let's look at our first problem. This says, look at this graph. Use it to solve these problems. So first, let's look at our graph. This graph is a bar graph. We see the different bars. This is a bar graph. So let's read our story. Mrs. B's class is graphing the number of photos they edited after their family reunions. Look at the graph and see how many photos each student edited. So what's important about this graph? This graph is showing us what? It's showing us the photos they edited, which each student edited. So we see we have Randy, Mary Beth, Danielle, and Ryan, and all of these students graphed different numbers. So that means that they edited a different amount of photos. So we're going to look at our first question. Which student edited the most amount of photos? So when we see the word most, we know that that means the biggest amount. So who edited the most or the biggest number? So we're going to go and what we're going to do is we're going to count how many each student had. So Randy had how many photos edited? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Randy had 6 photos edited. Now we're going to count Mary Beth's. 1, 2. Mary Beth had 2. Now we're going to count Danielle's. 1, 2, 3. Danielle had 3 photos edited. And let's count Ryan. Ryan had 1. So now that we've counted how many each student edited, we're looking for the biggest number, the most. So we have Randy, Mary Beth, Danielle, and Ryan. Who has the biggest number? Randy has the biggest number. 6 is the biggest number. So who edited the most? Randy. Now, we want to know which student edited the least amount of photos. And when we see the word least, that means we're looking for the smallest number. So when we see the word least, we're looking for the smallest number. So remember, Randy has 6, Mary Beth has 2, Danielle has 3, and Ryan has 1. Well, we know that it can't be Randy because Randy has the most. So we don't need to look at Randy. So now we have Mary Beth, Danielle, and Ryan. So we have 1, 2, or 3. What is the smallest number out of those? The smallest number is 1. So Ryan has the least amount of photos. Or he has the smallest amount of photos. So we just used our bar graph to answer questions on most and least. Now we're going to go on to our next question. So we have the same graph, same bar graph, with Randy, Mary Beth, Danielle, and Ryan, and how many photos they edited. But we're going to write an equation. So our problem says, write an equation. How many photos did Randy and Ryan edit all together? So the first thing that we see in this question is the word all together. And we know that means putting things together. We're going to be adding. So we can go ahead and we're going to put an addition sign in our equation because we know that we're putting things together. The next thing that we need to do is find out how many photos Randy has. So Randy is going to be represented by this R here, the first R. So we're going to go up into our graph and we're going to count how many photos Randy had. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we know that Randy had 6 photos. But now we need to know how many photos Ryan has. So Ryan's represented by the other R. So Ryan had how many? Ryan had 1. So now we know how many photos each of those students had. We know that we're going to be adding them together And we're going to find out C, and that C is our variable. C is what we're trying to find. The C represents how many photos all together. So now our equation reads 6 plus 1 equals blank. 6 plus 1 equals blank. So we can do this two ways. We can go ahead and we can just count out our photos, but we can also use the calculator. So let's count first. So we have 6 plus 1, so we want Randy. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we counted 7 photos altogether, but let's go ahead and use our calculator to double check. So we're going to put 6 plus 1 equals 7. So we were correct. Our answer is 7. Ryan and Randy have 7 photos altogether. Now we're going to look at our second question. It says, write an equation. How many more photos did Randy edit than Mary Beth? So the first thing to notice is that we see how many more. When we see how many more, we know that we're going to be subtracting. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our subtraction sign or our minus sign in our equation. The next thing that we need to know is how many photos Randy edited. So we'll go back into our bar graph. We see Randy's name and we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a 6 into our equation. So Randy had 6 photos. But now we need to know how many did Mary Beth have? So we're going to go back up to our bar graph and we're going to count how many Mary Beth had. 1, 2. So Mary Beth had 2 photos. So now our equation reads 6 minus 2 equals blank. 6 minus 2 equals blank. Okay, and because we want to see how many more, we know we're subtracting. So let's go ahead and pull up our calculator. And we're going to do 6, how many Randy had, minus 2, which was how many Mary Beth had, and that equals 4. So our answer is 4. Randy edited 4 more photos than Mary Beth. And we can also go up here and we're going to look at our bar graph. We see Randy and Mary Beth, and we see that we have these blank blocks. And let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. We could also just look at our bar graph and tell how many more that Randy had than Mary Beth, because we see Randy had all 6, Mary Beth only had 2, so the blank ones next to Mary Beth are how many they have different. So it's also 4. And let's look at our third question. How many more photos did Randy edit than Danielle? So once again, we see how many more. So we know we're going to be what? We're going to be subtracting. So you can go ahead and put your minus sign or your subtraction sign in your equation. So the first thing we need to know how many Randy edited. So let's go back to our bar graph. Let's count for Randy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we can go ahead and write a 6 into our equation for Randy. And the next thing that we need to know is how many Danielle edited. So we're going to go back into our bar graph. We're going to look for Danielle's name. So we see Danielle, and let's count. 1, 2, 3. So Danielle, had 3 photos edited. Now remember, our question asked, how many more photos did Randy edit than Danielle? So our equation reads 6 minus 3 equals blank, or C, and C is how many photos more. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to use our calculator. We're going to do 6 for Randy minus 3 for Danielle, and that gives us 3. So 6 minus 3 equals 3. And we can go back up into our bar graph and we can check that as well. So we see Randy and we see Danielle, and we have 3 white ones, right? 1, 2, 3. So we know that that is the difference between them. So our equation was correct. Let's move on to our next graph. So our problem says, use the graph to write an equation and solve this problem. So let's read our story. It says, Mary Beth says that she will soon edit the same number of photos as Danielle. So M in our equation is going to represent how many photos has Mary Beth edited. D is representing how many photos has Danielle edited. And C represents how many more photos will Mary Beth edit. So the first thing that we need to know is how many photos Mary Beth edited. So we go back up into our bar graph and we're going to look for Mary Beth's name and we're going to count 1, 2. So we're going to write a 2. And we know that 2 represents our variable m. So we can go down to our equation and we're going to put a 2 in our m spot. The next thing that we needed to know was how many photos Danielle edited. So we go back to our bar graph and we look for Danielle's name, and we are going to see her name and we're going to count 1, 2, 3. So we're going to write a 3 in our D variable spot. And we know that C is how many more photos will Mary Beth edit. So we see the words, how many more, we know we're going to what? We are going to be subtracting because we see how many more. So we're going to go ahead and put a subtraction sign in our equation. So now our equation reads 3 minus 2 equals blank, or C. So we can go ahead and we're going to write in a C for this. So remember, the C is our variable. So we're looking for C. So we now are going to solve the equation. So we're just doing 3 minus 2. We can use our calculator for this. 3 minus 2 equals 1. So we would put a 1 on this side of the equation, and it equals what? It equals 1. So we're saying that Mary Beth needs to edit one more photo to edit the same number of photos as Danielle. So now let's check our work. Let's make sure that we used the right numbers for the right variables. So we know we're going to start with Danielle. Danielle had what? Danielle had 3 photos. And we know that we're looking for how many more. So we're subtracting. And Mary Beth had how many photos done already? She had 2 photos done. And we want to know that that equals what? That equals C. And we know that 3 minus 2 is what? 3 minus 2 is 1. And 1 equals 1. So is our equation true? Did we plug the numbers in correctly? Yes. So since 1 equals 1, Mary Beth will edit one more photo. So Mary Beth will edit one more photo to have the same number of photos as Danielle. Let's look at our next problem. Brent is not on the graph. He edited 4 photos. How many photos will the graph show all together with Brent's photos? So Brent is not in our bar graph. We don't see him, but we know how many photos he edited. But we want to know if we put him on the graph, how many would we have all together? So the first thing that we need to know is A, how many photos does the graph show all together without Brent's photos? So we see the word all together, and we know we're going to be adding. So what we can do is we want every student's photo, so we can just count how many bars there are. So let's start with random. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there are 12 photos altogether without Brent. Then we're going to go back and we're going to read how many photos for B Brent edited. And it says Brent is not on the graph. He edited 4 photos. So Brent had how many? Brent had 4. And we're looking for C. How many all together with Brent's photos? Once again, we see that word all together. We know we're going to be what? We're going to be adding. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our plus sign in our equation. So now we're going to fill in our equation with our variables. So we know that A was how many photos does the graph show all together without Brent, and that's 12. So we're going to put a 12 in our A spot. And we know that B is how many photos did Brent edit, and that was 4. So we're going to put a 4 in the B spot. And this added together is going to equal C, which was how many photos altogether, including Brent's. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to solve our equation. So we have 12 plus 4 equals C. So let's pull up our calculator. Do 12 plus 4 equals 16. So we're saying that 16 equals 16. That there's 16 photos altogether, including Brent's. So let's check our work. Let's make sure. So we start with how many photos there were altogether without Brent. We know that that's 12. Then we know that we're adding in Brent's. Brent had how many? Brent had 4 photos. And because we want to find them all together, we're adding. So we're going to put our plus sign. And we're looking for how many they have all together. So we represent that as C. So once again, our equation reads as 12 plus 4 equals C. We can pull up our calculator again. 12 plus 4 equals 16. So we have 16 equals 16 for C. Is the equation true? Yes. So since 16 equals 16, the graph will show 16 edited photos all together. So our equation was correct. Now we're going to look at a different type of graph. we're going to be looking at a coordinate graph. So let's read our problem. Ryan is taking photos in different locations at his family reunion. Use the graph below to answer the following questions. So this graph right here that you see is a coordinate graph. So the first thing that we want to know is number 1. Ryan starts at -3, 3. Where is he? So before we do that, let's label our graph. So on a coordinate graph, you always have an x-axis. So this line here, this is called your x-axis. And you also always have a y-axis. So this line right here going down is a y-axis. When we look at our coordinates, I'm going to highlight what a coordinate is. The 2 numbers in parentheses. In your coordinate, the x-axis number is first, and the y-axis number is second. So we can go ahead and let's go ahead and color code first. Let's color code by highlighting our x and our y numbers. So the first number is going to be pink for our x-axis. And the second number is going to be green for the y-axis. So let's look at our first problem. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. So it says that Ryan starts at -3, 3. So first we go to our x-axis. We start in the middle. Let's go ahead and let's put a point for the middle to make this easier for us. So we start in the middle, which would be 0, 0. Now, it says Ryan starts at -3. So that means we're going to go first to the left because it's negative. So let's count over -3. 1, 2, 3. So we're here, we're on the x-axis, we're at -3. But then it says Ryan goes to 3 on the y-axis. So we know that the y-axis is the green. So we're here at -3. Now we're going to count up. Because it's positive, we're going up. And we're going to count 3. 1, 2, 3. So he is here. He's at this red dot. And this red dot is where? The picnic tables. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to write in picnic. So Ryan was where? He was at the picnic tables to start with. Zoom out. Then it says number 2, he goes to -5, -1 next. Where is he? So once again, we start in the middle. We see it's -5 on the x-axis, so that means we're going to go to the left first. So let's count -5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're here on the x-axis. And then it says on the y-axis, the green, we're going down -1. So we see negative, so we know we're going down. So let's go down 1. 1. Where are we? We're at the grill. We're at the orange dot. So -5, -1 is what? It's the grill. So we're going to write in grill. Let's look at number 3. He goes to -2, -2. Next, where is he? So let's start in the middle at 0, 0, our blue point. It says -2 first on the x-axis, so that means we're going left. So let's count 2 to the left. 1, 2. Then we're going -2 on the y-axis, so that means we're going down because it's negative. So let's count 2 down. 1, 2. So Ryan is at the what? He's at the green dot or the playground. So we're going to write in playground. Oops. And let's look at our 4th question. It says number 4, he goes to the soccer field. What are the coordinate points? So this time we're going to just look at our bar graph or our coordinate graph, and we're going to just look for which one is labeled soccer field. We look, here it is, it's purple. But we need to know what are the coordinate points. So what are the numbers we're putting in? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our x-axis because that comes first. And we're going to count over it. We see we're going to the right, so we know it's a positive number. So let's count. 1, 2, 3. It lines up. So our x coordinate is 3. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to write that in. Oops. Let's zoom out. I'm going to write a 3. Then we need to know what our y coordinate is. So we got 3. But how many do we have to go down to get to the soccer field? Let's count. 1, 2. We went down 2, and because we went down, we know it's what? It's negative. So we're going to write a -2. Make sure you put your negative and a 2. So the soccer field is at coordinates 3, -2. Let's look at number 5. He goes to the kickball field. What are the coordinate points for the kickball field? So once again, we look at our coordinate graph. We look for kickball field, and we see kickball field is in blue. So how many, we're going to start with the x. How many do we go over? We go over 1, but we went to the left, so it's -1. So we're going to write a -1 into our coordinate, -1. And then we need the y. So how many, we see that our blue dot's here, so we have to go up. So we go up, how many? We go up 1. And because we went up, we know that it's a +1. So we're going to go ahead and put in a +1 into our coordinates. So the kickball field is located at -1, 1. -1, 1. And let's look at our last question for this problem. He goes to the sand pit. What are the coordinate points for the sand pit? So let's look. Our sand pit is in yellow. So first we're going to start with our our x-axis. So we start in the middle and we go, here's the sand pit. We're going 1, 2, 3, 4. We went over 4, and it's positive because we went to the right. So we're going to write a 4 for our x coordinate. And now we need our y coordinate. So we're starting on the 0, y, and we have to count up because here's the sand pit. So let's count 1, 2, 3, and it's positive because we went up. So we're going to write a 3 in our y coordinate. So now our coordinate reads as 4, 3. 4, 3 is your sand pit.